My manager threatened to demote me. I just smiled and said, "Good, because the second you hand me that paper, this company owes me 8 figures." Then I dialed the bank on speaker, and the room went dead quiet. Hey Reddit, I'm Ethan, 35 male, contracts and compliance lead at a drone logistics company called Vantage Aero. If that job title sounds boring, you're absolutely right. It is boring, and that's kind of the whole point of this story. I'm getting ahead of myself. Quick context for you. I grew up in a house where reading the fine print wasn't a personality quirk. It was survival. My dad worked loading docks for 22 years until his heart gave out on a Sunday morning 4 years ago. My mom ran the cafeteria at an elementary school until her knees couldn't take it anymore. They taught me two things worth remembering. Nobody's coming to save you, and always know what you're signing. Since dad passed, I send my mom $600 a month, cover her prescriptions, and field weekly calls from my younger brother Corey, who treats my checking account like a suggestion box. I've got a mortgage, a truck with 160,000 miles on it, and zero margin for doing anything reckless. So when I tell you I played this whole situation patient and calm, understand that it wasn't because I'm some enlightened stoic. It's because I literally could not afford to be stupid. The demotion letter was printed on Vantage Aero letterhead, crisp white stock, official font. Somebody even used the premium card paper, which I thought was a nice touch. Premium cardstock for a demotion is the most Vantage expense I've ever seen. Imagine the scene. Conference room B, Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. 4 people sat across from me like a sentencing panel. Russ Collier, my direct manager, held down the head of the table wearing a slim-fit suit. To his left, Bryn Kessler from HR clutched a manila folder thick enough to be a problem. She had that practiced look of corporate sympathy, the one they must teach in HR certification courses, right between exit interview techniques and how to fire someone without blinking. Warren Gale, our CFO, leaned back in his chair, scrolling his phone like this entire meeting was a mild inconvenience between golf holes. And Elliot Marsh, the in-house lawyer, sat at the end looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else on the planet. "Ethan, we've asked you here to discuss your role going forward," Russ started, tilting his head with fake concern. "There have been some issues. Collaboration, cultural alignment, peer feedback." I said nothing. Let him cook. Bryn slid the paper across the table with 2 fingers. "Effective immediately, you're being reassigned to junior compliance analyst. You'll report to Kevin Loomis on the second floor. Your executive system access will be adjusted accordingly." Kevin Loomis, 27 years old, 9 months at the company. Still asked people where the supply closet was. Couldn't find a vendor contract with a flashlight and a map. That was who they wanted me reporting to. They didn't want to fire me outright because that creates documentation. Corporate loves consequences as long as they come without paperwork. A demotion this insulting was designed to make me walk on my own. Warren didn't even look up from his phone. I read the letter once. Then I did something that clearly wasn't in their playbook. I smiled. Not a big smile. Just enough to make Russ shift in his seat. "Before I sign anything," I said, reaching into my bag, "you should probably look at this." I placed a cream-colored envelope on the table. Thick paper. The Summit National Trust watermark was visible even under the fluorescent lights. Elliot grabbed it first because lawyers physically cannot help themselves. He went pale as he scanned the first page. This is a deferred compensation trigger clause," he muttered, mostly to himself, "with the previous CEO's signature. Notarized," I added. "Filed with our trustee bank 3 years ago. Active. What the heck is this?" Warren finally put his phone down. I leaned forward. "During the Kestrel acquisition, I negotiated an addendum to my retention agreement. Simple terms. If I file a formal report about executive fraud exceeding $5 million, and the company responds by demoting me, isolating me, or firing me before addressing the reported issue, my full deferred compensation releases immediately. $10.2 million, held by Summit National Trust under irrevocable instructions. Meaning once the conditions are met, the trustee releases the funds automatically. No one at this table can stop it." Dead quiet. Russ's pen stopped moving. "That's ridiculous," Russ said. "Page 4. Section 3. Signed by Don Ashworth. Approved by the Comp Committee as part of the Kestrel retention package. Funded through the acquisition reserve." I pulled out my phone and dialed Summit National Trust. Put it on speaker. Set it in the middle of the table like I was daring them to say something. "Summit National Trust Fiduciary Services. This is Rebecca. Rebecca, this is Ethan Rowe. Account verification 7742. I need to confirm trigger status on the Vantage Aero deferred comp clause." Keys clicking on the other end. "Yes, Mr. Rowe. I show your anticipatory notice was received 48 hours ago, and your integrity report filing date is on record. Can you describe the current adverse action?" I looked directly at Russ. "I'm being demoted to junior analyst, effective immediately." in response to a formal integrity report I filed 10 days ago regarding executive fraud. The underlying issues are unresolved. Understood. We'll need the written adverse action notice uploaded to the case file for final verification, but based on your account documents, this meets the trigger conditions. Once we receive and confirm that documentation, disbursement of $10.2 million will process within 1 business day. No company approvals are required on our end. That's when Warren finally sat up straight. And that's when I knew every late night, every document I'd buried, every time I'd kept my mouth shut while they twisted the knife, all of it was about to pay off. But I should probably start from the beginning. So the phone call in conference room B didn't happen by accident. That moment was 3 years in the making. Let me take you back. Vantage Aero moves stuff with drones, high-value freight, medical supplies, organs for transplant, lab specimens, sensitive equipment, anything where speed and chain of custody matter more than cost. We're talking about a fleet of autonomous aircraft operating under FAA Part 135 certificates, which sounds fancy but basically means the regulations are thick enough to use as a doorstop. One audit failure and the FAA grounds your fleet. Every rule has a form, and every form has a deadline that ruins someone's weekend. One insurance lapse and your liability exposure gets ugly fast. Compliance isn't a department advantage. It's the entire foundation. That's where I come in, or came in. 3 years ago, Vantage acquired a smaller outfit called Kestrel Systems to expand the Western Delivery Corridor. Standard acquisition chaos, hundreds of contracts needed harmonizing, vendor agreements, facility leases, insurance policies, pilot certifications, maintenance schedules, all of it had to be reviewed, reconciled, and integrated under one roof. I was the lead on contract migration, which meant I lived inside those documents for about 4 months straight. During the Kestrel integration, everything was moving fast, and everyone was overwhelmed. HR was drowning in onboarding. Legal was buried in regulatory filings. Finance was scrambling to reconcile 2 sets of books, which meant if you were paying attention, you could get a lot done without anyone looking over your shoulder. I was negotiating my promotion to senior contracts and compliance lead. Part of the deal was a standard retention package, deferred comp, vesting schedule, the usual golden handcuffs they put on anyone critical to the merger. And I was critical. I was the only person at Vantage who understood both the FAA Part 135 certificate transfer process and the full vendor contract landscape from the Kestrel side. If I walked mid-integration, the FAA filing stall, the insurance policies lapse, and the board's entire acquisition timeline falls apart. They knew it. I knew it. The retention number reflected that. But I asked for one addition. I need stronger protections, I told Margaret, the outgoing chief legal officer. She was 62 days from retirement and signing documents the way people sign birthday cards at the office. Quick, distracted, already thinking about her next vacation. Standard indemnification isn't enough? She asked without looking up. I'll be reviewing executive contracts and vendor relationships worth tens of millions. If I flag something serious and catch retaliation for it, standard protections don't cover my mortgage. She waved her hand. Draft something reasonable and send it over. Reasonable. Such a flexible word. I wrote the addendum over a single weekend. 16 drafts. I was not messing around. The core was simple, and I'll repeat it because it matters. If I filed a formal integrity report about fraud exceeding $5 million and the company responded with any adverse employment action, demotion, termination, forced reassignment, before resolving the reported issue, my entire deferred compensation would release as a lump sum, $10.2 million, held by Summit National Trust under irrevocable trustee instruction. Once triggered, the company had zero authority to stop the wire. No clawback, no cure period, no executive override. The trustee follows the instructions, period. That's what irrevocable means. Don Ashworth, the CEO, signed it in a batch with 30 other retention modifications during a board meeting that ran 40 minutes over schedule. The comp committee approved it on a Thursday afternoon. Margaret stamped it with legal's blessing. Then I did the part that actually mattered. I filed the executed documents with Summit, sent certified copies to my attorney at Keeler and Brandt, locked the originals in a safety deposit box, and waited. 3 years. Patient, quiet, doing my job. That same week, Corey called. My brother has a gift for perfect, terrible timing. Hey, so I'm a little short on rent. Just like 400, maybe 5. I'll pay you back when my situation stabilizes. His situation had been stabilizing for about 6 years running. I sent 300 because that's what I could do without dipping into my emergency fund. He didn't say thank you. Just, that's it? Classic Corey. I love my brother. But the man has never met a safety net he wouldn't jump into face first. My mom called the next day. Don't be hard on your brother. He's figuring things out. She's been saying that since he was 22. He's 29 now, still figuring. The point is, I had zero margin for error. So when things got bad at work, the plan was never to flip a table. The plan was to be patient and be right. So when I noticed, almost 3 years into the job, a vendor called Ridgecrest Compliance Solutions billing us $385,000 a month for drone airframe testing and regulatory verification services, quitting wasn't in the playbook. Playing it smart was the only move. The amount wasn't crazy for that type of specialized work. What was crazy was the company itself. Incorporated in Wyoming about 3 years earlier. No website, no industry certifications. Business address was a virtual office suite in Cheyenne. And every single invoice was approved personally by Warren Gale, our CFO, like clockwork. Within hours of submission. Never delegated, never routed through the normal chain. I checked and found out why. Warren had tagged Ridgecrest as a confidential executive vendor in the AP system, a designation that bypasses the standard 3-person approval queue and routes payments straight to the CFO's desk. It's supposed to be used for sensitive legal or security consultants. Nobody in accounts payable questioned it, because nobody questions the CFO's vendor classifications when they like their job. I closed my laptop that night and stared at the ceiling for a long time, because I was pretty sure I'd just found exactly the kind of thing my addendum was designed for. So I'd stumbled onto a vendor that smelled wrong. The question was, how wrong? I spent the next 3 weeks finding out, and the answer was worse than I expected. Ridgecrest Compliance Solutions. Let me walk you through what I found, because none of this required hacking or stolen passwords or anything dramatic. Reviewing vendor agreements and payment flows was literally my job description. They just didn't like what I found. First, the invoices. $385,000 a month every month for almost 3 years. Nearly $14 million total. Each invoice used the same template, same formatting, same typo on line 4, where verification was spelled verificatin. Month after month after month. If you're going to fake invoices, at least run spell check. If you're stealing, at least proofread like you respect the craft. Second, the approvals. Every single invoice was signed off by Warren Gale personally. In normal vendor relationships, approval authority rotates or gets delegated. You have backup signers, secondary reviews. Warren never let anyone else touch Ridgecrest. He also coded the payments across 3 different cost centers: flight operations, maintenance, and regulatory affairs. That's a diffusion technique. Splitting costs across budgets is the spreadsheet version of hiding snacks in different cabinets. You split the total across multiple budgets, so no single budget owner ever sees the full picture. I leaned back in my chair that night and cracked my knuckles. 2 red flags was suspicious. But I wasn't done yet. Third, the corporate filings. This is where it got interesting. Ridgecrest was registered in Wyoming. I pulled the Secretary of State filings and found the registered agent was a firm called Harmon Legal Services in Cheyenne. That name rang a bell. I checked Warren's executive disclosure forms, the ones every officer at our level has to file annually listing outside business interests. Warren's personal investment entity, an LLC he disclosed 2 years earlier, used the same registered agent, same firm, same Cheyenne address. That's not illegal by itself. But when one company is writing the invoices and the other guy's boss is approving them without telling anyone about the connection, that's a problem. I poured another coffee and kept pulling threads. Fourth, the facility records. Ridgecrest was supposedly performing airframe testing and compliance verification at our Western hub. The invoices described detailed technical work, structural load assessments, propulsion system audits, FAA readiness inspection. It sounded very official. I pulled the site records for that facility going back 3 years. No work orders matching Ridgecrest, no visitor logs, no equipment installation permits, no badge access requests, not even a parking pass. $14 million for services that never happened at a location that never saw a single Ridgecrest employee walk through the door. Now, this is where Chuck Dempsey enters the story. And I need to tell you about Chuck because he becomes accidentally crucial later. Chuck worked the IT help desk on our floor, mid-20s, wore the same rotation of 3 graphic tees, had a desktop background of a golden retriever wearing sunglasses that he'd never once changed. The man gave off this vibe like nothing at this company could possibly matter to him less. I was having trouble pulling historical payment records from the procurement database one afternoon. System kept timing out. I submitted a help desk ticket expecting the standard 3-day wait. Chuck showed up at my desk in 20 minutes, which was already suspicious because nothing in corporate IT happens that fast. Procurement portal? He said, already typing before I could explain. Yeah, they migrated the database to a new server last weekend. Whole thing's janky now. He fixed my access issue in about 40 seconds. then spent the next 10 minutes telling me about a competitive eating circuit he was training for. Dead serious. The man had a spreadsheet tracking his hot dog consumption rates per minute. While rambling about protein loading strategies, he casually mentioned he'd given my entire floor expanded read-only reporting access to the procurement database because doing individual user permissions was, in his words, a waste of everybody's time, especially mine. Fewer tickets, he said with zero guilt. You want some trail mix? I make it myself. Yogurt raisins. I passed on the trail mix, but silently thanked God for Chuck's laziness. That broad access let me pull the complete 3-year payment history for Ridgecrest without requesting special permissions or raising any flags, courtesy of an IT guy who valued snack prep over security protocols. I spent a weekend organizing everything into a clean 30-page report. Invoices with matching metadata, approval records showing Warren's exclusive sign-off pattern, corporate filings showing Ridgecrest and Warren's LLC sharing the same registered agent and mailing address, facility logs proving zero physical presence at the site where $14 million of work was supposedly performed. No guessing, no accusations, just the data and where it came from. Monday morning at 9:15, I submitted a formal code red integrity report through Vantage's proper compliance channel. That's the highest level internal alert the company has, reserved for situations involving significant financial irregularities. I sent it to the Internal Fiduciary Committee, copied the Audit Committee chair, and filed notifications with legal and HR by the book. Every page of the book. Then I went back to my desk, ate lunch at my computer like it was any other Monday, and waited for the retaliation I knew was coming. I filed the integrity report on a Monday. By Tuesday, my career was being taken apart piece by piece. First move, my access to the procurement system got revoked. Official reason, scheduled system maintenance. Funny how system maintenance only targets the one person asking questions. Interesting how that maintenance only affected my account and nobody else's on the entire floor. Second move, I was removed from the weekly leadership meeting. Reason, agenda constraints. The agenda had been the same standing format for 2 years, but apparently there was suddenly no room for the contracts and compliance lead. Third move, by Wednesday afternoon, half my direct reports were reassigned to other teams for critical project support, which is corporate code for, we're isolating you. Russ called me into his corner office that Wednesday evening. Glass walls, expensive chair, the kind of room designed to make the visitor feel small. You're making noise about things above your level, Ethan. No preamble, no small talk. Just a guy who thought intimidation was a management style. I filed a compliance report. That is my level. It's literally my job. Vendor management isn't your lane. Vendor contract compliance is the first bullet point on my job description. I can email it to you if you've forgotten. He didn't like that. His smile went cold. People who don't understand their lane tend to end up in roles where the lanes are a lot narrower. Think about where you want to be in 6 months. Thursday brought the performance coaching session with Bryn from HR. Let me set the scene. My last formal review, which was 4 months old, was exceeds expectations across every single category. Not meets expectations, exceeds. I had a company award for contract optimization sitting on my desk. But suddenly, according to Bryn's freshly manufactured file, I had collaboration deficits and cultural misalignment and something called insufficient organizational empathy, which I'm still not sure is a real thing. She put me on a 30-day performance improvement plan with goals so deliberately vague they could mean anything or nothing. Demonstrate enhanced cross-functional partnership. Exhibit alignment with organizational values. Foster a culture of constructive engagement. Goals that sound professional on paper but are impossible to measure, which means they're impossible to meet, which was the entire point. A PIP like that isn't a performance plan. It's a pre-written termination document. HR writes those PIP goals with a thesaurus in one hand and a shovel in the other. You sign acknowledging receipt, fail the unmeasurable goals, and they fire you for cause with a clean paper trail. I documented every single thing. Phone photos of every screen with timestamps visible. Calendar records showing meetings rescheduled with 30 minutes notice to conference rooms on the opposite side of the building. The time Bryn scheduled a mandatory coaching session during my approved lunch break, and then wrote me up for being late to a 1 p.m. meeting I was never told about. My corporate card got flagged for unusual activity, despite having 0 charges on it in 6 months. My parking spot got reassigned to a new hire. Every petty move, logged and saved. I uploaded batches to Jason's secure client portal every other night. They were building their case file against me. What they didn't realize was I was building a better one against them. And then Chuck from IT accidentally handed me the whole game. Management submitted a ticket to remove my access to the executive reporting portal. Standard retaliation move. Chuck got the ticket on a Friday afternoon. Instead of removing me from the executive email distribution list, he added me to it. Wrong drop-down menu. For roughly 4 hours, every email sent to the senior leadership team landed in my inbox. My inbox filled up like someone accidentally CC'd the entire company on a panic email. Most of it was noise. Budget projections, scheduling conflicts, one surprisingly heated thread about whether the company holiday party should have a theme. But buried in that noise was a message from Russ Collier to Warren Gale, sent at 11:40 p.m. the previous night. Subject line, row situation. The body read, need him off the floor before the audit committee meets on the 15th. Handle it however you want, just make it clean and make it fast. Bryn is building the file. Straight from the manager's keyboard, I pulled out my phone, took 3 photos of the screen with the full email header and timestamp visible, and uploaded them straight to Jason's secure portal before I even stood up from my chair. Chuck realized his mistake about 3 hours later and showed up at my desk looking mildly annoyed at himself. Hey man, I think I messed up your permissions. Some drop-down thing. Are you getting weird executive emails? Nothing I can't handle, Chuck. Cool. My bad. These drop-down menus are garbage. You want some trail mix? I made a new batch. Extra cashews this time. He fixed the error and wandered off, completely unaware that he just handed me the single most important piece of evidence in this entire situation. I owe that man a lifetime supply of yogurt raisins. That Friday, Bryn scheduled what she called a final alignment conversation for the following Wednesday. Conference room B, 10 a.m. 4 attendees, Russ, Bryn, Warren, Elliot. I knew exactly what that meeting was. They were going to present the demotion or offer termination and frame it as a mutual performance decision. My brother texted that weekend. Mom says you're stressed about work. Just keep your head down, bro. Don't make waves. That's your whole problem. You always gotta make things complicated. I didn't reply. People who've never been in a real fight always have strong opinions about how to fight. After the retaliation kicked in, but before the Wednesday meeting, I had 5 days to get every piece in position. I'd been preparing for this for 3 years, but the final stretch still mattered. First call, Jason Keeler at Keeler and Brandt, my attorney. I'd been his client for 3 years, ever since I filed the original clause with Summit. He's the kind of guy who reads a contract the way a mechanic reads an engine. When I called and said it's happening, he didn't need a long explanation. I sat at my kitchen table with the phone on speaker, walking Jason through each piece. The Ridgecrest evidence, 14 million in fake invoices, the shared registered agent and mailing address connecting the shell company to Warren's personal LLC, the retaliation timeline from the past 2 weeks, Russ's email about getting me off the floor before the audit committee met, and the trigger clause sitting in escrow at Summit National Trust, ready to go. First things first, we send formal preservation notices, Jason said. Those are litigation hold letters, basically a legal notice telling Vantage they have to keep all relevant documents and communications. If they destroy anything after getting that letter, it's called spoliation, and judges take it very seriously. Nothing scares executives like a litigation hold that forces them to stop deleting their own texts. He drafted and sent the letters that afternoon. Everything I'd gathered went into his firm's secure files under attorney-client privilege. Monday of that final week, I went into the office and played defeated. Slumped shoulders, quiet voice. Stopped pushing back on anything. When Russ asked me to hand over my remaining project files, I nodded and said, of course. When Bryn sent me a condescending email about self-reflection exercises as part of my improvement plan, I replied with earnest gratitude. Thank you for the guidance, Bryn. I really do appreciate the support. Let them think I was done. I went full polite mode because politeness is invisible armor in a room full of cowards. Defeated employees don't fight back. That's what they were counting on. Tuesday, something unexpected happened. Nina Okoro from payroll stopped me in the parking garage at 7:45 a.m. before anyone else was in the building. Nina was quiet, mid-40s, had been at Vantage longer than almost anyone on the floor. She looked nervous but determined. I saw your integrity report, she said, keeping her voice low. I process executive compensation. There's something else you should know. She handed me a flash drive. Retention bonuses paid to outside consultants. Same routing patterns as your vendor payments. Same intermediary bank. Different entity names, but the structure is identical. I've been watching it for over a year. How much? Another 4 million on top of what you found. At least. I looked at her. Why are you telling me this? Because I've watched them bury things for 2 years, and I'm tired of pretending the numbers add up when they don't. I gave the flash drive to Jason that afternoon. He reviewed it and added it to the evidence file. The total was now closer to 18 million in suspicious payments, all connected to Warren Gale. Jason let out a long breath on the phone. This isn't small time. This has been going on for years across multiple companies. This is the kind of thing that gets people indicted. On Tuesday evening, Jason submitted the complete evidence package to federal authorities through proper legal channels. No drama. Just a lawyer presenting organized evidence on behalf of a client who'd been retaliated against for reporting it. Wednesday morning, I put on a clean button-down, poured coffee into a travel mug, drove to the office with the windows down because the weather was good, and I figured I should enjoy the drive since it was probably my last one to that parking garage. I'd already notified Summit National Trust that adverse employment action was imminent and to prepare for potential escrow release. Rebecca Chow confirmed receipt and readiness. Everything was set. All that was left was for Russ and his team to do exactly what I knew they were going to do. I sent one text to Jason at 9:50, meeting at 10. If I don't check in by 10:30, proceed with everything we discussed. His reply, already prepared. Go handle your business. At 9:58, I stood outside conference room B. Through the glass, I could see Russ arranging papers at the head of the table. Bryn had her folder open with signature tabs sticking out. Warren scrolled his phone. Elliot stared at his legal pad. I walked in at 10 o'clock, and you already know what happened next. But let me fill in what I skipped. Back to conference room B. Where we left off, Rebecca Chow from Summit National Trust had just told a room full of executives that $10.2 million was about to leave the building. Let me tell you what happened after the silence broke. Warren moved first. He leaned across the table and grabbed my phone. Watching a CFO try to bully a trustee is like yelling at an ATM. This is Warren Gale, CFO of Vantage Aero. I'm ordering you to cancel that disbursement immediately. No funds move without my authorization. Rebecca didn't raise her voice. Sir, these are irrevocable trustee instructions, executed 3 years ago by your former CEO and approved by the board's compensation committee. The funds are held in a segregated account outside Vantage's operational control. Once trigger conditions are confirmed, we are legally obligated to process the release. The company has no standing to intervene. That's the nature of an irrevocable arrangement. Warren looked at Elliot. Elliot looked at the table. Nobody looked at me. I let that hang in the air for about 5 seconds. Then I opened my second folder. While everyone's in the same room, I said, keeping my voice flat, there's something else you should know. My attorneys at Keeler and Brandt submitted a complete evidence package to federal regulators yesterday. $14 million in fraudulent vendor payments through Ridgecrest Compliance Solutions, a company sharing the same registered agent and mailing address as the CFO's personal LLC, plus an additional $4 million in retention bonuses routed through the same structure. All documented, all time-stamped, all in the hands of people who investigate wire fraud for a living. Warren's hand was shaking. Not a lot, but enough. That's defamation, Russ snapped. You can't just accuse people. I'm not accusing anyone. I filed a formal integrity report 10 days ago through Vantage's proper compliance channel. Nobody investigated. Nobody responded. Nobody even acknowledged it. Instead, you revoked my system access, put me on a fabricated performance plan, and scheduled this meeting to push me out. And I know it was Cordy Ethan, Russ, because you sent Warren an email saying, get Roe off the floor before the audit committee meets. Make it clean and fast. Bryn is building the file. Russ's face went gray. How did you? Doesn't matter how. What matters is, everything is documented. The fraud, the retaliation, your own words, the timeline. It's all with my attorney, and it's all with the people who handle wire fraud investigation. Bryn hadn't said a word since I pulled out the envelope. She was sitting perfectly still with her pen frozen over her notepad. Like if she didn't move, maybe none of this was happening. Her manila folder, the one she'd spent weeks filling with fake performance notes, was still open in front of her. It looked pretty stupid now. Elliot finally spoke up. We need to stop this meeting immediately. I need to review the original clause. I need to call outside counsel. We cannot proceed with... Elliot, the clause already triggered. You had 3 years to find it in my personnel file, and you didn't. The conditions are met the moment you hand someone a demotion letter in retaliation for a fraud report. I'm uploading this letter to Summit's case file the second I walk out of here. They'll process the disbursement by end of business tomorrow. I stood up, straightened my shirt, picked up my phone from where Warren had set it down. Rebecca, thank you for your time. I'll follow up directly for wire confirmation tomorrow. Of course, Mr. Rowe. Have a good day. I ended the call and looked at each of them. Russ, who'd spent weeks orchestrating a corporate hit job and put the whole thing in writing. Bryn, who'd built a fake performance file like it was a school project. Warren, who'd been draining the company through a shell vendor for 3 years and genuinely thought nobody beneath him was paying attention. And Elliot, who was already typing on his laptop, probably figuring out how to explain to outside counsel that he'd missed a $10.2 million clause sitting in a file for 3 years. Elliot's keyboard started clacking like he was trying to type his way out of liability. "You'll be hearing from Keeler and Brandt regarding release agreements," I said from the doorway. "I'd suggest the board starts asking questions about where $18 million went, because the regulators are going to." I walked out of conference room B at 10:20 a.m., 20 minutes. That's how long the whole thing took. I grabbed my bag from my desk, folded the demotion letter into my jacket pocket, picked up the orchid I'd somehow kept alive for 3 years under fluorescent lights, and walked to the elevator. Nobody said a word. In the parking garage, I sat in my truck, photographed the demotion letter front and back, and uploaded it to Summit's secure case portal from my phone. Rebecca confirmed receipt within 4 minutes. By noon, Vantage's outside law firm had filed an emergency motion to freeze the Summit disbursement. They threw everything at the wall: breach of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment, fraudulent inducement. They even argued the clause was unconscionable, which is legal speak for we don't like it and wish it didn't exist. Jason called me at 3. The judge reviewed their motion and denied it. His reasoning was that the company cannot trigger a contractual provision through its own adverse action and then ask the court to save them from the consequences. Their words, not mine. Motion denied. I sat on my couch and exhaled for what felt like the first time in 10 days. The wire hit my account at 10:05 a.m. the next morning. Summit National Trust, $10.2 million. I stared at the confirmation screen for about 30 seconds, then closed my laptop and made coffee. The confirmation email looked boring, which is exactly what you want from a $10 million wire. The good stuff from the back of the cabinet that I'd been saving for I don't know what. Apparently, I'd been saving it for this. Things moved fast after that. Corporate fast, which means lots of conference calls, carefully worded emails, and people suddenly discovering principles they didn't have 2 weeks earlier. The board held an emergency session on Friday. I wasn't in the room, but Jason got the summary through Vantage's outside counsel, who was now very interested in being cooperative. Warren Gale was placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. Russ Collier was terminated for cause. The board cited his documented role in retaliating against a whistleblower, which apparently becomes a serious governance concern once it costs the company $10.2 million. Nothing motivates values like an unexpected 8-figure payout sitting on the balance sheet. Funny how that works. Bryn Kessler was quietly reassigned to new hire onboarding paperwork, which felt about right for someone who'd spent weeks building fake performance files. The forensic auditors came in the following week. Independent firms selected by the board, not Vantage's usual consultants. They found everything I documented plus another $6 million in payments I hadn't even identified, routed through 2 additional entities. Warren's operation was bigger and sloppier than anyone realized. Total exposure landed somewhere north of $20 million. Federal investigators served a search warrant at Warren's home on a Tuesday morning 2 weeks later. I didn't find out through some dramatic phone call. Jason forwarded me a 3-paragraph blurb from a regional business journal, buried below a story about a new restaurant opening downtown. Vantage Aero CFO subject of federal inquiry into financial irregularities. No cameras, no perp walk, just the slow, boring process of people actually doing their jobs once someone handed them the evidence. Elliot Marsh resigned the following week. Quietly, no announcement. One day his name was on the company directory, and the next day it wasn't. I don't know if he jumped or was pushed, but either way, the guy who missed my clause in the personnel file decided he'd rather be somewhere else. Can't really blame him. That's a rough thing to explain in your next job interview. The legal resolution between me and Vantage took about 3 weeks to finalize. I signed mutual releases with smart carve-outs. I kept the $10.2 million, obviously. I retained the right to cooperate with any federal investigation as a fact witness. And I insisted on one non-negotiable term: full whistleblower protections for Nina Okoro and for Chuck Dempsey, even though Chuck had no idea he'd helped and would probably be confused if anyone tried to explain it to him. The board agreed without pushback. They were too busy trying to survive the next earnings call to argue about protecting 2 mid-level employees. They also offered me a short consulting arrangement, 6 months, $750 an hour, helping the forensic team understand contract structures and vendor relationships, reporting directly to the board. I took it, because I wanted to make sure the cleanup actually happened and didn't get buried the second the pressure eased. First day of the consulting gig, I walked into the building with a visitor badge and sat down in conference room B. Same table, same chairs, whole different situation this time around. Nobody from the old crew was there to see it, but that was fine. I wasn't doing it for an audience. Nina texted me the day the internal announcement went out. Got promoted. Senior analyst, Full protection package. Nobody around here even looks at me sideways anymore. Thank you for actually doing something. I sent back a thumbs up. Didn't need to say more than that. Corey called that following weekend. Yo, mom said something happened at your job? You okay or what? I'm good, Corey. Cool, cool. That's good. Hey, so actually, I'm a little short this month. Corey. Right. Yeah. Never mind. Glad you're good though, bro. I almost told him. Almost said, Corey, I don't have to worry about your rent request for a very long time. But I didn't. Some conversations aren't worth having until the dust fully settles. And honestly, if I told Corey I had money, his rent would get a lot more expensive real quick. Some things never change. I sat on my porch that Sunday evening with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand. Quiet street. My truck in the driveway. My mom's number showing a missed call I'd return in the morning. They wanted me in the basement. I ended up on my porch watching the wire confirmation sit in my inbox. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.